We are thrilled today to be joined by the very insightful Jay Bilas. Jay, appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me on, you guys. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, definitely going to be a fun episode here. So I guess just to jump right into it, since it's very recent, I had the pleasure of assisting you at the draft last week, and there were quite a few surprises, in my opinion, of where players went. I know, Dan, you have a guy that you want to touch on, and then Jay, if you want to mention anything that sort of surprised you.
Dan, go ahead.
Okay, so the first player that surprised me at where he went was Bryce Sensabaugh at 28 of the Ohio State Buckeyes. And Dave, I know that's your guy, so I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but I really love Sensabaugh's game. I mean, 6'8", great length. He's really, really good wing scorer. He's going to help out any team he goes to. And I think the fit with Utah is really good because they took Hendricks at 8, meaning Sensabaugh doesn't have as much pressure right now, right? They signed John Collins. Lauri Markkanen's going to come back for another year. This is somebody who can kind of take a backseat role his first few years, get really good development, and then by the time he's ready, I think he could be a really, really solid player in the league for a long time.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I was surprised Jet Howard went as high as he did. He was one of the first sort of shooters off the board and went before Grady Dick and Jordan Hawkins. That surprised me a little bit. And I was surprised that Cam Whitmore fell as far as he did. I thought he was a top 5 talent, and he went number 20. And then I was a little surprised. I thought Sensabaugh seemed like, some of the draft analysts were saying he was into the first round. That's where he went. But I thought he was a lottery type player just because he can really score. His defense is still a question mark, but he's capable. But offensively, there aren't a lot of question marks with him.
Yeah, no, obviously very biased, but there's very few bucket getters like Bryce in this draft, in my opinion. So him falling that deep was insane to me. But we asked our viewers to send in a few questions that they had for you. And a very popular one, and might have to keep it appropriate for on air, is your favorite Coach K story. Can be basketball related or not.
My favorite Coach K story, there's so many of them. He started recruiting me, I think I was 17 years old. And I liked him from the very beginning. My favorite was probably when he was getting on us one time about things that we needed to do. We needed to have better attention to detail. And then we had to be able to communicate tough things to one another. We couldn't be afraid to get on one another, and we had to accept it the right way when one of us did. And right after that, he got into some different things, more specific, and he wrote on the board that we needed to rebound. And he spelled rebound REBOUB. And one of my teammates was sitting next to me in the meeting and leaned over and said, "Do you think he wants us to point that out? Kind of attention to detail and telling each other tough things." He meant, that he misspelled that. And I said, "Yeah, why don't you do it?" So we didn't point it out, but I always thought that was funny. And the rest of practice, every time a shot went up, we were going, "Rebound!" Everybody said, "Come on, rebound!" So that was a pretty good one when he couldn't spell rebound right.
Yeah, no, that's very funny. And then another thing, just touching on sort of the Dookie background that you have, is a lot of people wanted to know, like over at Ohio State, we obviously have rivalry with the team up north. But being a former player and then an assistant coach at Duke, what does that Duke-North Carolina rivalry truly mean?
Well, first of all, we can say the name of our rival. We don't have to say up north or what. I don't even know what Michigan says about Ohio State. But I didn't grow up in that area. I grew up in California, so I probably didn't understand it when I got there, the depth of it. So for me, I wanted to beat North Carolina because they were really good. It wasn't some sort of Hatfield-McCoy thing. I learned later on why both sides had this intense dislike of one another, but I never understood if we lose and they lose, it's still a good day mentality, because I don't understand that. I didn't root for a rival to lose. In fact, when I was in the ACC, I always wanted other ACC teams to win. because I thought it spoke well of us when teams that we would beat everybody else. That meant that, it felt like through transitive property, that meant we could beat everybody else, that kind of thing. But the one thing about the rivalry that is hard to wrap your head around is the idea that so many people are interested in it. That's true of Michigan, Ohio State, I think. Also, that rivalries, in my view, are the same. Every rivalry is the same to the participants. Like, I don't think that the Xavier-Cincinnati rivalry is less intense than Duke, Carolina, or Ohio State, Michigan. It's just that more people are interested outside of the rivalry in Duke, Carolina, or Ohio State, Michigan. And that's what sets those rivalries apart. Is everybody, even people that don't have a dog in the fight, are really interested in it, and that sets it apart. In my view, it's just, and then plus it's been so close. I mean, even Ohio State, Michigan in football hasn't been as close year in, year out as Duke, Carolina in basketball. That's been, we put up the graphic all the time. I mean, the last 100 times they've played, it's like 50-50, and they're separated, 2,100 points to 2,099. You couldn't make it up. If you were making it up, people would think it was crazy to do that. But those are the real numbers. It's been just so close at such a high level, and the games always deliver.
Jay, I know you've been very vocal in the past about NIL and the transfer portal in college basketball. I've been around UNLV. I've seen guys come and go, take more money, larger roles elsewhere. I wanted you to kind of touch on your opinion on the current state of NIL and then the transfer portal and its impact that it's made on modern day college basketball.
Yeah, Nick, it's interesting. I think the NCAA, the entire structure, is just caught in a transition period now. I think this should have happened a long time ago. To me, this has been a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry for a long time. And so in my judgment, the transfer portal basically is a creature of the NCAA fighting in court over money and realizing that his transfer policy made it look really bad. And so when the money was the thing they cared most about. So for a lot of decades, the transfer policy was, they called it a year in residence. So if you transferred, you had to sit out a year, but you only had to do it in 5 sports. It was football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, and hockey. Everything else, you'd be eligible right away. So they realized they couldn't justify that. And the sitting out a year, the year in residence, the thought behind it initially was, you transfer, you need a year to get your legs under you at a new school and acclimate yourself to the new school. Well, that doesn't make any sense when you're telling a person who's been in college for at least a year that you have to acclimate yourself to your new school before you can play when freshmen are eligible right away. That makes no sense. That a high school player with 0 college experience doesn't need to acclimate him or herself, but a person with college experience needs to get acclimated to a new school. That's just ludicrous. So they came up with this stupid transfer portal. Do I think that it's the right thing to do? No. I just think you ought to be able to transfer, and they can have reasonable restrictions. You got to transfer by a certain date, and be enrolled in school by a certain date at your new school. That's not a big deal. And, you'd have the idiots out there that say, what, do you want to be able to transfer at halftime and play for the other team in the second? You could say the same thing about an assistant coach. What, you want an assistant coach to be able to quit and then his job and then go coach for the other team in the second half? It's stupid to say something like that. So to me, all these things could be solved, if you will, if the schools would just agree that, look, do whatever you want. If you want to sign a player to a multi-year contract, go ahead. If you don't and the player can walk out the door, go ahead, do that too. We have different levels for all these years of some players are on scholarship, some are not. We have scholarship restrictions in certain sports. If you want to pay them, and you can have a contract with a player, sign them to a 1-year deal, you can sign them to a multi-year deal, you can have a buyout, you can do whatever you want as long as it's an arm's length negotiation. It's just not as difficult as we're making it. The problem is they don't want to pay the players. And so you hear now coaches will say, well, NIL was supposed to be this. And what I think Deion Sanders said recently, I love NIL, I just don't like collectives. Well, why did collectives sprout up? Because the schools want to pay these guys. They want to attract the best talent. and they're going to do it however they have to do it. And so you can't tell me that any school that has a collective attached to it can't just say, hey, we're not dealing with this. So no collectives. Anybody that talks to any of these players, you're banned, and we will not allow players on a collective deal to play for us. You can do that in a heartbeat. They don't want to. They want the best players. So we're just stuck in a transition period between the strict amateurism rule, which was never a thing. It was always a sham. And where we're ultimately going to be, where the schools just pay the players directly. That's where we're headed. That's where it's going to wind up. And to me, we should just get there right away. But that doesn't seem to be the NCAA's way. They want Congress to come in and give them an antitrust exemption or give them a national law that says that players have to be restricted in certain ways. And there's, I would ask Congress before they did that, name one other person outside of college athlete that you're contemplating this. They're not restricting coaches' salaries or administrators' salaries. They're not putting a salary cap on what schools can spend on sports. They're just saying, okay, we need to control the most valuable asset in this entire business, and that's the athlete labor. And without the athlete, there is no game. And so they're trying to restrict the thing that truly is most important in all this.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great point. And one thing I always think is kind of funny is like you'll have regular students on scholarship who can get paid to do whatever, and schools almost enjoy that. And it's like, oh, this smart tech owner went to our school and now they're making all this money. But heaven forbid an athlete who's on scholarship, same situation, does the same thing. It just makes no sense to me.
That's exactly right. And that's where a lot of the rationalizations come from by the NCAA is, look, they're getting a scholarship. Look what they're getting. Well, look what other students are getting. Other students are on full scholarship. In fact, more non-athletes get scholarships than athletes. And nobody's trying to restrict their pay or say they can't be employees of the universities. In fact, there are a lot of students that are employed by their universities in different capacities, and nobody says a word. So the idea that students can't be employees is patently false. And look, whatever any school wants to do, I mean, the only rules we should have, in my view, are rules of play and how many players we want on a roster. Game starts at 1:00. If you step out of bounds, it's my ball. If I foul you in the act of shooting, you get 2 shots if it's inside the arc and 3 shots if it's outside the arc. The rest of it, we should handle. Like we should just let the individual schools handle on their own, just like they do with coaches. We're not saying, hey, this coach got a free parking spot. That's not fair. Or how come this school's paying more money to their coaching staff than that school? We're not saying that. And we shouldn't. And wait a minute, this school is spending more on facilities. They're flying private. It's stupid. And all this is fixable because the problems, the things that we call problems, the NCAA created on its own. And we can fix it in 2 seconds, but just by taking away these ridiculous restrictions on athletes that are adults. These athletes, all these college athletes, with very rare exception, they're all over 18 years old. They are all adults, and we let them choose their own doctors. What they can't decide what they want to do with regard to an NIL deal or whether they have an agent. If a school doesn't want to deal with an agent, then don't. But you can't tell a player you can't have an agent. To me, that's stupid.
And then, in your opinion, do you think we'll ever sort of get to that point where let the schools, do what they want, pay the players? Or do you think the sort of power structure will always prevent us from truly getting there?
I think we will get there because the players are smarter than ever. They're better represented. And the NCAA has lost court cases that traditionally they've fared better on. And, I don't think that's going to change. I think the Alston case before the U.S. Supreme Court changed everything. The Supreme Court of the United States told the NCAA, you are no longer above the law. And if they think that concurring opinion in the Alston case by Justice Kavanaugh doesn't have effect, it does. So lower courts now are not going to give the NCAA the deference they've received in the past. And it's over. And everybody now sees this for what it is. It's a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry. It has been for a long time. When I was playing, I fought against that idea because I was part of the NCAA structure. But I've come around on that. All you have to do is look at it. USC and UCLA go to the Big Ten for what? Academic reasons? No, they went because they're making $100 million a year, and they have big TV contracts and all that stuff. I don't have a problem with any of this stuff. Make as much money as you want, but stop telling the players that they're restricted and they can only make this or only make that or only dip their toe in the water this much. It just isn't right. In fact, I think it's wrong to the point of being immoral. When you're using somebody to make unlimited amounts of money, but you're at the same time restricting them from making money, I think that's exploitation, and I think it's immoral and it's wrong, and we need to stop doing it.
Yeah, no, that was great input. And then one other question we got from our viewers, the people want to know, we have some fans of your "I gotta go to work" tweets with the musical quotes on them. If you haven't seen them, go look at Jay's Twitter. But where did that originate from?
It started in around 2010, I'd say, when we were doing game day at Michigan State, and I think we were on the air, if I remember right. Draymond Green was warming up. We're down on the floor, and Draymond Green's warming up for the Spartans, and he's wearing headphones. And we asked him what he was listening to, and he said Young Jeezy. And Hubert Davis, who was on our set at the time, now he's the head coach at North Carolina, had said, "Is that on your playlist or iPod or whatever was the thing back then?" It's been a while. And I said, "Yeah, actually it is." And so I got some blowback on social media about it. Come on, man, you don't listen to the Snowman, that kind of thing. So I put a couple of lyrics out here and there. And if I remember right, it's sort of becoming a myth now, but I had to stop interacting like that. So I got to go to work at the end of some lyric, because I actually had to get up and go into my office. And it kind of started there. And I've been doing it in one form or another ever since.
That's actually awesome. I had no idea that that's where it came from. That's cool. But then one other thing we wanted to touch on, just, from reading your books or different articles in the past, you're a very, high profile voice in sort of helping motivate others. So what would you recommend to current coaches or leaders within basketball or not, of dealing with the highs and lows that come with modern day leadership, while also having to stay positive for others?
Yeah, I think that's not just an athletic thing. That's for anybody. For me, it's always taking a step back from whatever situation I'm in and trying to think about, what is this going to look like later? And I heard somebody recently say, anything you're involved in that you seem emotional about at the time, step back and ask yourself, what will I think of all this when I'm 80 years old? Will this be a big deal? And the answer is probably no. That it doesn't mean that you're not thoughtful about it, but I think a lot of things that you deal with in the moment can be ruled by emotion, whether you're angry about something or frustrated or whatever. And that goes the same when you're a player. I got emotional as a player, and you might get down on yourself a little bit, or you might be overconfident at times when things are going well. You just have to take a little step back and kind of gather yourself. And the other part is being prepared for whatever you're doing. I think the one regret I have about my playing career, if you want to call that a career, I probably didn't prepare myself for practice every day like I should have. That I was a hard worker and I got to practice early and all that stuff. But I think before practice, I was sort of waiting for practice to start instead of preparing myself to compete in practice that day. Practice always sometimes seemed like it was a have to thing, like I have to go to practice today, instead of really taking some time to prepare myself for what I was trying to accomplish that day, and getting the best out of myself that day and the most out of practice that day. And I'm a little better at that stuff now. The problem is, now my life, there's no physical component to what I do. It's all mental preparation. So preparing myself for a day, preparing myself for what I'm supposed to do. That's why I always, kind of remind my friends when we talk about it in coaching that, coaching's difficult, but there's no physical component to coaching. There's no opponent. the players have an opponent that's trying to stop them from doing what they're trying to accomplish. And so you have an opponent, and you may have competition in your job as a coach or in any job, but you don't have an opponent trying to stop you from doing what you're intending to do. And so, and there's no physical component. Coaches aren't exhausted after the game like players are. They may be mentally tired, but they're not physically exhausted. So players have more to do than coaches do. And the best coaches, I think, respect that their jobs are very, very different.
Jay, I kind of wanted to ask you about the gold standard of college basketball. Obviously, the hierarchy when it comes to elite programs. What makes those programs so great outside of recruiting top 100 guys and having the top of the top coaches with high experience?
I wish I could put my finger on it, Daniel. I think the best organizations I see have a particular culture and way of doing things, and they stick to it, and they have high standards and stick to it. They're not all over the place, all over the map. They're not different every day, and that's what I think the best places do, whether it's a law firm or an athletic office. You have certain standards, and everybody's expected to meet them. And I think on the teams I played on and then was a part of later on when I was a graduate assistant coach at Duke, I think Coach K did a great job of setting the tone on what the program was all about. And I think the best programs are very much the same. They may have different personalities within them and call it different things, but the product on the floor, in practice, in the locker room looks very similar. And I think and you can do it in a particular year, but when you do it over time, that's why when you have continuity of your roster and you have older players and examples are set. That's why, Tom Izzo says it all the time, coach-led teams will only go so far. The player-led teams are the ones that traditionally do the best. Or generally do the best, because when you have leadership from your players, it doesn't have to necessarily be the players on the floor, but within your roster that set that tone every day and have those expectations. Those teams seem to do the best.
Definitely makes sense. That big on culture as well. If you love the people you're around and truly believe in each other, then destined to do some great things. But another major question we like asking all of our guests that come on is, if you could go back, 60 years or whatever, and give a single piece of advice to your younger self, or I guess in today's world to young professionals trying to grow within the sport industry, whether it's, as a player, coach, TV personality, whatever it may be, what would that, single piece of improvement be?
I would probably tell myself to slow down if I went back, for 40 some years and to me in high school, college, I would say slow down a little bit. That, you're not going to reach the finish line in one day. Handle today the right way. And after you handle today the right way, prepare yourself to handle tomorrow the right way. And keep your horizon a little bit shorter. I think you tend to get in a hurry sometimes, and that goes back to what I said before about, the regret I have of not being more mindful of preparing myself for practice that day. You maybe have 3 days before your next game. That doesn't mean that you can be wasteful of that first day of practice in those 3 days. Every day is really important if you treat it as such, and give your all and all your attention to that particular day and what you have to do. Then you can throw your attention on the next day. It doesn't mean you're not mindful if you got a game in 3 days, but you can't play the game on Thursday, a Saturday game. So you have to handle Thursday the right way. And so I would tell myself to slow down a little bit and be mindful of what you're doing today.
Love that 100%. And sort of building off that of living in the moment and focusing on the here and now. you've had a lot of professions in the past. For people who don't know, whether it's as a coach or a lawyer or ultimately now as a broadcaster, what was either the pivotal point or maybe the moment where you realized that broadcasting was the path that you wanted to ultimately take?
I got a full-time offer from ESPN in the late 90s, and I had to decide whether I was going to continue to pursue a full-time career in law or devote my attention full-time to broadcasting. And when I made that decision, I made it with the intention of not looking back, but I made it with a lot of confidence that if I screwed up the broadcast side, I could jump back into my law practice with no problem. And so that was a nice safety net to have, to be able to, it didn't seem like a risk to do that. So for me, that was important in making that decision, because I had a young family at the time and I had responsibilities, but I didn't have any fear of making that decision, because I had something, that I felt was really good to do. I had a choice to make, but both choices were really positive. So I wasn't leaving one thing for another. I had something to go to, positive direction I wanted to go in. I wasn't turning away from being a lawyer. I was turning toward being a broadcaster, if that makes sense. And so I think having prepared myself for my law career was pivotal in ultimately having a successful, whatever you define as success, but having an enjoyable broadcasting career.
Definitely good to have multiple options. And one other thing we love to ask our guests, the sport industry, whether you're coaching, broadcasting, whatever it may be, is very cutthroat, hard to break through, even harder to stay in positions. What is your why, or what, keeps you waking up at 6 a.m. every day and grinding and working just as hard as you did 20 years ago?
I enjoy it. It doesn't seem like work to me. The only thing in my job now that is work is the amount of travel I have to undertake. And travel can be exhausting and difficult. It's not, I don't, even once I'm at a destination, a travel destination, I enjoy where I am. I don't like getting there. During the season, travel doesn't seem to bother me because I get used to it really quickly. But toward the end of the time off I have an initial dread of, man, I got to get back on the road again. I think about that, but once I started doing it again, I don't think about that. But to me, I don't feel like I grind. I mean, I probably felt that way as a lawyer a little bit, that being a lawyer is a hell of a lot more difficult than being a broadcaster. There are hard days and hard moments. Being a broadcaster is easy. And look, it's a competitive field, but everything enjoyable, everything good is competitive. It's not like being a lawyer's not competitive. Everything's competitive, in a field where a lot of people are interested in it. So I don't look at that as being a deterrent or a stop sign. I'm fine with all that, but I enjoyed being a full-time lawyer, and practicing law. But, I can't lie to you, like being a broadcaster is a hell of a lot more fun. So that's one of the reasons I did it, was it's not as stressful and it's way more fun. And, at the end of my lifetime, whether it's tomorrow or 20 years from now or 30 years, whenever, I don't think I'm going to be sitting on my deathbed going, God, I wish I had grinded it out more. Nobody's going to care at the end of my lifetime what I did. They're not going to care whether I practiced law or whether I went into broadcasting or all that. And very few people are going to miss me. So what I look at is what's the most enjoyable for me and my family and the most fulfilling. And I've tried to make those decisions accordingly along the way.
Jay, I actually had a quick question for you. about you mentioned how traveling can be exhausting, especially for the job that you have. So I want to just give you a quick question. What is one college town that you go to that you look forward going to? And then what's another college town that maybe gets a little bit more hype and isn't as fun as the other ones you go to?
One of my favorites is going to Lawrence, Kansas, to go to Allen Fieldhouse for games. I just love that place. But almost everywhere you go, or at least that I go, I really enjoy. All the college towns I go to are very different and they're unique, and they all have their own traditions, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the different arenas, the different traditions that places have. Some of them, the ones that maybe, when you see them on the schedule, you're like, ooh, that's going to be a tough one. It's because of travel. It might be, there are places that are difficult to get to. And like you got to go to Lubbock, Texas to do a Texas Tech game. It's not easy to get there. But it's not that big of a deal. That's why. Bob Knight, when he was at Texas Tech, used to complain about the officials they would get, and it was because it's hard to get to. The officials travel too, and they're looking at their schedules, and some of them don't want to take 2 or 3 planes to get somewhere. They want to do what's easiest for them, and I'm the same way. If I could do all my games where all I had to do was drive an hour to get there, I'd sign up for that tomorrow. But I do enjoy. I enjoy Kansas. I enjoy going to Indiana. I love, Ohio State. I haven't done a UNLV game in a long time. It's been a while since I've been there, and I've never done a game at Oregon. I've had a lot of Oregon games over the years, but I've never done a game at MacArthur Court. Never done a game at the current arena, and I'd like to do that someday.
Yeah, we would love to have you if you ever want to come.
Yeah, talk about hard to get to. Eugene is no picnic getting there.
No, it's no joke at all.
If no one has anything else, we can get into the final little segment that Keyshawn recommended. So
go ahead, Dave.
No, you're good.
Keyshawn Hall, one of my old teammates. He's up at George Mason now. He asked a question. He wanted to get your top 5 Duke players of all time. We're going to kind of do like a draft. You can have first pick. We'll do top 10 kind of Duke players of all time.
First pick would be between Christian Laettner and Grant Hill. And Christian Laettner is the most accomplished Duke player of all time. But I happen to think, and I get a lot of blowback on this, I think Grant Hill's the best of all time. And it's a close call, but I would take Grant Hill.
All right, for our squad, Nick, I'll let you make the pick, but hopefully you don't mess it up.
Yeah, I'll take Laettner then. I mean, that's the kind of 1-2.
As the third pick, I would take Johnny Dawkins. I played with Johnny for 4 years, and he was a great player, great teammate, and I think he's the most important player Duke's ever had. So I would take Johnny Dawkins.
All right, Dan, second pick, big pick here.
Okay, so we got Christian Laettner in our front court. I'm going to take a wing guy. Shane Battier was one of the best Duke players of all time. He was unstoppable in his day. So we'll take Battier for our team.
And I'll take J.J. Redick, the all-time. He and Johnny Dawkins are the 2 all-time leading scorers. So best shooter Duke's ever had. I'll take Redick.
Stole my pick there, Jay. But with our third pick, got 2 solid front court options. Might be recency bias, but his 1 year there looked unstoppable. I'm going to have to go with Zion.
It's a good call. And next I'll take Jay Williams.
All right, Nick, got to get us a guard here.
I'm going to go Bobby Hurley. Take
call.
that pick.
Good call.
That's a great pick. I would have picked him.
So if you're going, you need guards. I need a big guy then. Elton Brand.
Dan, you want to round out the lineup?
Okay, I'm gonna go. I need somebody to match up with Elvin Brand, and I know this player didn't have a successful NBA career, but he was unbelievably dominant in college. I'm gonna take Jahlil Okafor to fill out our team.
I like it. Like it a lot.
How many have we taken each?
That's 5. That's 5 in each team.
That's 5. Okay.
I'm kind of shocked. Jay Bilas, the center from the '80s, didn't make it up there.
Somebody'd have to set a screen in that crew, and pass the inbound. Somebody'd have to inbound it on my team, otherwise it'd never get inbounded because the first guy would take it up and shoot it.
Yeah, no, Jay, this was wonderful having you on. Appreciate your time. Unless you have any questions for us, just really thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights today.
No, thank you guys. It was my pleasure to be with you.